The 2013 movie The Wolverine is fairly problematic for a few reasons. The movie has Wolverine's World War II buddy, who he shouldn't remember, but this movie contrives that for no reason, Wolverine is suddenly remembering his past, so okay, he calls up Wolverine and says, "Hey, you want to die, I don't want to die, what if we transfer your healing factor to me?" And Wolverine says, no, and then lots of fighting and chase scenes happen, and then Wolverine has carnal knowledge of the World War II buddy's granddaughter, and then you get a 7-foot tall robot that sucks the healing factor out of Wolverine, but not really, and then that's the movie. This is incredibly dumb. But when this movie first came out, I gave it a passing grade because it was better than the previous Wolverine movie. I didn't think things could get any better than this regarding Wolverine solo movies. But I did have problems with it then, and I have problems with it now. But I'm not here to review this movie, I'm here to fix it. But there's so much that doesn't work about this movie, both as a movie and as part of an existing franchise. I'll be saying those exact words again before I finish with the X-Men movies, so brace yourself. By this point, the people making these movies had already given up on maintaining any consistency between films, so you get stuff like Wolverine getting his adamantium removed in this movie, and then inexplicably having it again in the very next appearance in the next X-Men movie, which is made even more infuriating since they tease Days of Future Past in this movie. But if you've been keeping up with my fixes for the previous X-Men movies, you know I have at least made the attempt to not only improve each movie individually, but also make them all cohere together a little better, and remove all the continuity snafus that I could. That's as good a time as any for me to remind you of my rules for my fix videos. When I'm operating within a larger franchise I've already done fixes for, I keep the fixes from those movies when putting my fixes into place in this movie. While I'll be using very little of what this movie gave us, the pieces are there to make something that, not to toot my own horn, is pretty compelling, I think, but also works within my own X-Men Fixverse. So let's get to it. We're getting rid of the Jean Grey hallucinations. In my fix for the Dark Phoenix saga, Jean Grey didn't die, so it wouldn't make sense for Logan to be hallucinating about her. But also, in the movies we got, Jean and Logan knew each other for maybe 2 weeks and interacted with each other in that time for maybe 2 days. I do not buy that almost a decade after Jean died, Logan would still be hung up about her death to the point that he wants to die himself. If the movie wanted Wolverine to have a death wish, they could have just gone with him being really old and getting tired of it all, kind of like what they did in Logan. He's over 100 by this point, he can be world weary, but it's framed around him missing this woman who he barely knew, and he wants it all to be over. That's incredibly sloppy. Then you have the jarring tonal shifts. You have some decent thematic stuff the movie tries to work with, like duty to your family and loss of a loved one, even if you only knew her for 2 days, and the man versus the animal within. But the movie also has that bullet train fight sequence, which I admit looks really cool, but feels like it belongs in a different movie than the one that has a scene where Logan sorrowfully has to kill a bear that shouldn't have been hunted like it was. Not to mention the man in the 7-foot robot suit stealing healing factors, the woman with snake powers that are comical, and the woman who can sometimes see how someone will die. Seriously, what was up with that? You have one power, and you can't tell that Shinjin has faked his death? Does the movie think when someone temporarily flatlines that actually means that they're dead and not just close to death? Hey Yukio, why didn't you tell Logan that he's actually going to die fighting his clone in the year 2029, and he'll get buried by a bunch of preteen clones of the X-Men? To make a long story short, too late, this movie needs to pick a lane and stay in it. Either go with the really broody heavy stuff that's very prevalent in the first half of the movie, or go with the adrenaline-fueled action movie stuff with snake women and robot men. I believe a story can balance serious themes with the more colorful comic booky stuff, but this movie does not pull it off. For my fix, this is still a superhero movie with superpowers, but it's not going to be as bombastic as snake women and robot men. But we're also not going to deal with Wolverine having a death wish and sad bear deaths and stuff like that. Slightly more upbeat than the first half of the movie that we got, but slightly less crazy than the second half. In my fix for X-Men Origins Wolverine, we don't get any straight answers about Wolverine's past, which is how I prefer it. So it won't do to have an old World War II buddy call up Logan and invite him to come visit. We need another reason for Logan to go to Japan. In my fix, the X-Men are still active and Wolverine is still with them, going on missions with the team, but also every now and then going on solo missions, like if the team is busy dealing with something else and Cyclops needs someone he can trust to handle this other thing. My fix for this will be in early 2002, so it's only been less than 2 years since the events of the first movie. By this point, it would definitely be pretty difficult to hide the fact that these actors are starting to age, but I think most of them who kept returning to these movies aged pretty well over the years, so I doubt anyone would question this only taking place in 2002. And you wouldn't have to call attention to when this takes place in the movie, but I'm mostly doing that for myself, doing all of these movies. I need to have a clear idea of the timeline stuff for later videos. We will introduce Shiro Yoshida, also known as Sunfire, as a student at the school in this movie. In the comics, Sunfire is about the same age as Cyclops and the rest of the original X-Men, but here he's a little younger than Iceman and Rogue, so by now he's a senior classman. Shiro has an inner rage that he struggles with because his family is is the backbone of the organized crime of Japan, Clan Yoshida. He sees the good things the X-Men do, and he wants to follow in their footsteps, but he also feels an obligation to remain loyal to his family. Sunfire is called back home, and shortly after he leaves, he contacts the X-Men to let them know that he will not be returning. Wolverine will follow because he's been trying to help Sunfire conquer his rage, which is something Wolverine struggled with over the course of these movies as well. We'll get most of the characters we got in the movie, but they will play very different roles. We have Shinjin Yoshida, the head of the Yoshida crime family. He is the old school criminal, but all of his rivals and even some of his closer friends are ready to move into the 21st century and do things differently than they did when they were younger. But Shinjin is stubborn and will do whatever he can to hold on to the old ways, which is why he recalls his son Shiro back home. Yes, I am making Shiro Shinjin's son. In the comics, Shiro is Shinjin's nephew, but I think the family stuff works a little better if Shiro is more directly connected to Shinjin. Shinjin intends to use Shiro's mutant abilities to sort of enforce his philosophy that the crime families of Japan should hold on to the old ways. But Shiro isn't Shinjin's only child. There's also Mariko, who disdains the criminal aspect of her family, and if it was up to her, they would completely ditch the crime element and go into legitimate business. Mariko is a really weak character in pretty much every appearance I've read with her in the comics. She was an extremely passive and bland character in the 1982 Wolverine miniseries by Chris Claremont and Frank Miller, which was something of an influence on this movie. And while Tao Okamoto is not turning in a bad performance, that's all her. On paper, this is still a very boring and passive character. The idea that Mariko wants to legitimize the family business comes from some of Mariko's last appearances before she was killed in Larry Hama's Wolverine run. It's not much, but it's more than most of her other appearances where she sits on the sidelines and is seen but not heard. Then you have Kenichio Harada, Shinjin's illegitimate son. The tragedy here is that Harada is exactly the son Shinjin wants. He's loyal to Shinjin and wants to keep doing things the way they've been doing them, unlike Shiro or Mariko, neither of whom have any interest in the family business. But Shinjin wouldn't take a pee-pee on Harada's face if it was on fire, and Harada doesn't see that, or if he does see it, he refuses to accept it. Because even if Shinjin is horrible to him, he's still family, which is a big deal to everyone in Clan Yoshida. I won't be going full Silver Samurai armor here. Harada's mutant power in the comics is to channel vague energy into his sword, so we can do something with that. He can do a cool thing where he shocks Wolverine by sending an energy blast through his claws, but no big bulky armor. I want to show a closer relationship between Shiro, Mariko, and Harada. They're all cousins in the comics, but none of them seem to like each other very much. Shiro is one of Japan's only superheroes, so he doesn't associate with the criminals in his family, and Harada in the comics varies from being an honorable opponent slash sometimes ally to the X-Men to yelling about how Mariko is a woman and isn't fit to run the family. Here, even though Shinjin has a strained relationship with all three of his kids, I'd want them to be pretty close with each other, both growing up and now when they're older. They're all divided between what they want and what they feel duty compels them to do, so that will put them at odds with each other, but they still love each other. And you have Yukio, who works for Shinjin. In the comics, Yukio is supposed to kill Wolverine on Shinjin's orders, but because she suddenly caught a case of the I love you feelings for this guy, she decides to disobey orders and wants to help Wolverine bring Shinjin down. Yukio did not start off being especially compelling, nor has anyone actually succeeded in bringing any dimension to her after her introduction in the 1982 Wolverine miniseries. But if I had to choose the best moment that Yukio has ever had, it was when she was a shoulder devil to Storm in the main X-Men series. Storm was kinda uptight, and Yukio convinced her to loosen up a little, and this is what influenced Storm to get her mohawk. I'd be applying that dynamic between Yukio and Wolverine. Instead of Yukio turning to mush at the sight of a big strong man, can you tell that Frank Miller was involved with the creation of this character? She's going to be much more of an antagonist to Wolverine. Wolverine's always been a bad boy, he doesn't play well with others, he wants to let the inner animal out, but at the same time, he's been shown a better way, and now he wants to honor the man who showed him that way, and he does the best that he can to tame his worst impulses. Yukio is here to tempt him to cut loose and give in to his inner impulses. While the comics try to play Yukio as charming and someone you're supposed to like, it never actually gives you a reason to like her, and I wouldn't try to do that here. While Wolverine is trying to convince Shiro to return to the X-Men, he will be dealing with Yukio whispering in his ear that it would be much more fun to just kill those triads who are shooting at him. Maybe she can be flirty with him a little, but it would need to be clear that she's not actually interested in him and is only interested in corrupting him. And maybe when Yukio sees that Sunfire is Wolverine's weak spot, she will try whispering in his ear too. She works for Shinjin, so she can tell Shiro that Shinjin isn't that bad, and if Shiro disagrees with Shinjin's ways, maybe he should stay here and rein in his father when possible. And someday Shinjin is going to die, and when that happens, Clan Yoshida will need a leader, and you're the legitimate firstborn son. Of course, she doesn't care if he does this, she just wants to mess with Wolverine. The movie does a romantic relationship between Wolverine and Mariko, probably because they had a relationship in the comics. But while I never did care much for Mariko in the comics, that worked a little better because it played out over a period of time. There's 3 years between her first appearance when Logan is making eyes at her and their engagement. This movie doesn't have that much time to develop a relationship between these two, but it still wants to do it. So Wolverine meets Mariko, she doesn't like him, and in less than a week, not only are they sleeping together, but they're giving each other the I love you eyes, but they can't be together because they both have their own thing that they have to do. Aww, but this movie does does not earn that. Why does Logan like this woman who he met less than a week ago? Why does she like him? I can't answer these questions because these characters are not very developed in their relationship. Even Wolverine, who has appeared in 4 full movies by this point, isn't very developed in this movie. When you put 2 characters in a relationship in a story, you need to come up with concrete things both characters like about each other. It really shouldn't feel like the relationship was put there just because movies have romance, so we have to do it too. And since I put Wolverine and Storm in a relationship in my fix for a couple of the previous movies, I wouldn't want to discard that just to play with a Mariko relationship for one movie. But I do think Mariko could be an integral part of the story. We will have Wolverine make it to Japan, he tracks down Shiro, who is overseeing some gangster activity on a dock or something. Then Shinjin's men will fire on Wolverine, and he runs. Yes, he has a healing factor, but these guys have poison-tipped weapons or something like that. And if Wolverine is heavily poisoned or drugged, his body needs time to heal, and he can't do that in the middle of a big brawl. While he runs, Mariko pulls up in a car, she yells, "Get in!" He doesn't question it because he doesn't have a whole lot of options. He finds out she is Shiro's sister, and Shinjin doesn't want her to be part of the family business because he's old school, and he doesn't think women should be doing what men do, which suits Mariko just fine because she's trying to topple the family business. She was spying on her father's operations, trying to get some dirt on what they are doing. She's probably very idealistic, and she knows she wants to stop her family from being involved in the crime stuff, but she doesn't know how to get there. She and Wolverine become platonic allies because they can help each other. Wolverine can help topple a criminal empire in the process of saving Shiro from this kind of life, and Mariko doesn't want Shiro involved here any more than Wolverine does. She was happy when he went to America because she thought he was safe from this kind of life. We will get some scenes like the Thomas Jane Punisher movie where Wolverine does some guerrilla stunts to stop Shinjin's operations from moving forward. To add a wrinkle, Mariko doesn't want to start a gang war, so she has Wolverine do some attacks on some of the rival families also. This way, Shinjin isn't going to say, "It's probably that one guy doing all of this," and then he attacks some guy who isn't an innocent, but Mariko still doesn't want him to die because of something that she was involved with. Shiro will somehow figure out that Wolverine is the one doing all of this, and he will have a private meeting with Logan. He will say he doesn't want to be here, but he doesn't have a choice. Wolverine tells him, "Hey, your commitment to your family is commendable, but the X-Men are your family also. It seems this guy didn't care much about you until he found a way that you could be useful to him." Shiro gets mad and tells Logan the next time they meet, it will be as enemies on the field with Shiro following the edicts of his father. Yukio has been hired by Shinjin to watch some of his operations and to take action the next time one of his prospects is attacked. She saw the whole conversation between Wolverine and Shiro. Bum bum bum. Here is where Yukio will try to snuggle up to Wolverine. She isn't interested in him, she just wants to play with fire. If you've ever seen or read Hedda Gobbler by Henrik Ibsen, Yukio is going to be kind of like Hedda, manipulating people for her own personal gain, and she doesn't really care who gets hurt as long as she comes out on top. I bet you weren't expecting a reference to some classic literary drama in this Wolverine video, huh? Wolverine's not into it, he tries to get her to leave him alone, and she ends up sticking him with whatever poison Shinjin and his men use on their enemies. It's not fatal to Wolverine, but it will slow him down throughout the movie since she gave him a pretty concentrated dose. One thing that worked about the movie we got was Viper putting the weird metal straw into Wolverine's heart. It was weird, but it depowered Wolverine just a little bit in a crucial moment, which is not a bad idea dramatically speaking when you're dealing with a pretty powerful character. You know, it adds drama. Yukio gets away, and Mariko will find Wolverine and try her best to get him detoxed a little bit. When Wolverine wakes up, the poo-poo has hit the fan. He's been framed for the death of Shinjin Yoshida. His body was found last night with 3 stab wounds, as well as a torn piece of cloth that came from a rival gangster. If you want a comic book reference here, you can say the gangster is Matsuo Sureyaba, but he wouldn't play a big part in the movie. Wolverine is well known enough, thanks to his time with the X-Men, that he is now public enemy number 1 in the Japanese underworld, and with the cloth at the crime scene, a full-on gang war is about to erupt. Of course, Mariko knows Wolverine didn't do it, but she can't convince anyone of that because they will know that she was working with Wolverine this whole time. Wolverine tells Mariko about the woman he met last night, and Mariko realizes it's Yukio. Yukio has worked for her father for years, but she never trusted her. Yukio had no real loyalty to their clan, but the money was good, and so she continued to work for Shinjin. With Yukio confronting Wolverine, she must have known he was responsible for the hits on the business, and she decided to take this opportunity to flip the whole table over. The middle of the movie will have Mariko dragging Wolverine around Japan as he slowly recovers, both of them trying to stop things from getting worse with the gangs, and Harada seeking Wolverine out to get revenge for the death of Shinjin. Yukio is trying to convince Harada that Matsuo is an enemy that they need to deal with, but he is pretty laser focused on his hunt for Wolverine. Shiro, technically in charge until all the highest ranking members of the family can palaver and figure things out, shockingly decides to sit tight and think things through. Yukio is hoping with Shiro's well-documented anger that he would get fired up and go after Wolverine, possibly plunge all of Clan Yoshida into a war against their rivals she framed for helping Wolverine kill Shinjin. But Shiro does investigate, and he discovers while Shinjin was stabbed, he was also poisoned by the same poison Clan Yoshida uses. He doesn't know who killed his dad, but he is sure it wasn't Wolverine. Harada will be tearing up the underworld looking for any clues to Wolverine's whereabouts. He will eventually find someone who saw Wolverine on the night he was fleeing from Shinjin's men, and he will tell Harada that Mariko was with Wolverine. Harada will come after them, and he wants blood. We will get an even match since Wolverine is beginning to recover, but he's not the unstoppable killing machine that he used to be. Mariko tries to reason with Harada, but as far as Harada is concerned, she betrayed the family by allying with this guy who killed their father. And it should be clear that this is really tearing up Harada because all of Shinjin's children were pretty close with each other. As Harada is about to deal the killing blow, Shiro comes in and stops him. Harada is ready to listen to Shiro since he wouldn't expect Shiro to give in to his inner calm unless it was really important. Shiro explains the levels of poison in their father's body, and Harada realizes they were set up. Mariko explains to them it was Yukio. Harada is still pretty upset with Mariko since she still betrayed the family even if she didn't have anything to do with their father's death. Shiro will be the mediator here and will tell them they can work this out later, but right now they have to put a stop to the gang war Yukio tried to plunge their family into and find justice for their father. Meanwhile, Yukio goes to Matsuo to warn him that the Yoshidas are coming. Matsuo is smart enough to ask why Shinjin's soldier who served him loyally for years would now warn a rival who is said to have had a part in his death. Yukio will try to play innocent and say she knows he was framed and she believes one of Shinjin's power-hungry children framed him and wanted to take over the family business as well as eliminate a potential enemy. When the Yoshida offspring and Wolverine arrive, they've got Matsuo's whole crew ready to rumble. Even when they say they're not here to fight, Matsuo doesn't believe them after what Yukio has told him. Yukio will attack Wolverine, acting like she is defending her new boss from the guy who tried to frame him for the murder of Shinjin. But in reality, she's lost her cool since Wolverine has gotten in the way of her plans and she is ready to take him out. While they fight, she can explain that she wanted to plunge the criminal underworld into chaos so that she could land on top after the dust settled. Your typical villain monologue thing. This isn't exactly in line with the comic book Yukio, who is more chaos for the sake of chaos, but we need someone who has some kind of plan and isn't just doing stuff because it's fun. I don't think that would work for a big superhero summer blockbuster. While Wolverine fights Yukio, Harada can hold off Matsuo's gangsters somehow, and he tells Shiro that he needs to step up and represent Clan Yoshida, as it is now his duty. But Shiro says Mariko should be the one to speak with Matsuo. He will explain how he never wanted to be part of this life, and their father's death does not change that. Even though Mariko detests the criminal aspects of what her family were involved in, she is still unnatural at diplomacy, and she is able to convince Matsuo that they do not want a war with him. Matsuo calls off his people and has his men take Yukio into custody. Wolverine asks what they plan to do with her, and they will make a vague reference about how a traitor is dealt with in their line of work. With everything taken care of, Wolverine and Shiro will return to Xavier's, and Mariko and Harada will be running the family business together. While Mariko does not approve of what her family does, she knows she cannot immediately take the family out of the crime business. It will leave a void, that sort of thing. She will have to slowly ease them out. And Harada, although he would prefer they do things the way Shinjin wanted them done, he knows the family business, so Mariko keeps him on to run operations. But he ultimately answers to her. He doesn't like it, but she's the legitimate heir to the throne, so he doesn't have any other choice. And that's it. Like I said, drastically different from the movie we got, but with almost all of the characters from the movie still at play here, but in a different capacity, which I feel is closer to the comics and works a little better in the established world from the previous X-Men movies as well. I hope you guys liked this one, and if you did, be sure to hit up that like button and share this video like it's your child's report card that you're proud of. And if you did like this, then you should check out some of the other videos I've done. If you're interested in more of my fixed videos on the X-Men movies, I'll be tackling another one real soon, so look forward to that. In the meantime, I'll be watching you guys, so I hope you'll be watching me!